Firepower threat defense, SSL Decrypt. Okay, we're going to go through a couple of use cases here. So if you look at the topology, what we got here is starting on the outside, we've got an outside host that's going to connect to a DMZ, which is represented by the orange switch. We're going to do some decryption inbound here. We also have an inside network that's shown as green here. We're going to do some decrypting as we get out to the internet, as well as to the DMZ. And we have our management network with Firepower Management Center. And we also have Active Directory. So we can build policy based on user and groups. So the use cases that we're going to focus on is Sales 1 is going to decrypt and re-sign job posting URLs. HR group is going to decrypt, re-sign social applications. And then everyone's going to get decrypt, re-sign for Netflix. Do not decrypt health and finance. And the default action is going to be do not decrypt. Okay, so we're going to use Active Directory for the first two options. And then the last option obviously is going to be anybody. We're also going to do decrypt and re-sign using distinguished name for EICAR. This is going to let us look at malware in SSL or TLS. And then we're also going to do decrypt with known key. So we're going to import the public key and the server key of a DMZ server offering web services. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to download the CA certificate from our Enterprise Root CA. So this is a vanilla default installation. It's got Microsoft Certificate Authority, and I didn't do anything more than do the installation. So I've just downloaded the CA. We're going to go to Objects, Object Management. Here we'll go to PKI. And here, again, what we can do here is we can add a couple of objects and then use it a variety of places within the management console itself. So let's add that trusted CA. We'll give it a name. And now once we've done this, we have this object available to us, right? And we can use it within SSL TLS Decrypt. All right, so that's good. Now the next step in the process would be let's create an internal CA. This is going to allow us to do or issue certificates on behalf of the sites that we want to decrypt. And then obviously that allows us to decrypt that payload and be able to do full inspection on it. If we look real quick just before we go there, you can see the attributes of that CA certificate. All right, so let's go to the internal CAs. And we'll generate a CA. And we'll give this a name. Okay, something meaningful, of course. Then from here, we'll do the country name. We will add the province or state, and then the locality or city, maybe the organization, the organizational unit, and the common name. And what we'll do here is once we get this filled in, we'll generate that certificate signing request. And then we're going to move over to our trusted certificate authority and sign it as a subordinate a CA, so it can issue certificates on behalf of the Enterprise Root CA. Just finishing up here, we'll enter the name and we will generate the CSR. All right, we'll just Control A inside here and Control C to get that, do a copy of the CSR request. Now we'll go to certificate authority. We'll go back to the root of cert serve. And we'll click request a certificate. We'll do advanced certificate request. And we'll paste that file in and we'll ask for subordinate certificate authority. I'm logged in as administrator here as well. On the console. So we'll do the submit, and you can see the certificate's been issued. We'll download that certificate, give it a meaningful name to make life easier later. And then we're going to go back and install that certificate. Okay, so we'll go back to that CSR. We'll go to install certificate. We'll browse. We'll select it. And we'll save that out. Okay, again, just like the other one, we've got a view of all the attributes that make up the certificate, right? From validity, time, subject name, etc. And now we have that available to us, right? So now we can start building out our policies. Now, everything under access control, in my mind anyway, is more of an advanced object, right? It's still building policies, but it's not used until you add these elements to the access control policy. So here we'll create a SSL policy. We'll give it a name, and the default action is going to be do not decrypt, okay? Now, before we start building policy, let's go to the trusted CA certificates, and let's add that trusted CA that we added earlier. And I have a habit of hitting save all the time, right? It's just like back in the day when we used to write memory or copy run start. So it's a behavior I picked up. Here I have undecryptable actions, right? So I can say unknown cipher suites we want to block with reset, for example. So you can set that at the top level and enforce that further down. Here, the default actions do not decrypt. I'm going to set logging on. Again, I'm putting logging on here because I'm going to do a lot of testing, right? But you always want to be selective in the logging that you do. And again, when you're building policy, even though you have a bunch of available attributes to build a policy, all you need to do is use the minimum amount to make the flow unique enough to match, right? Just because you have 8 or 9 or 10 attributes that you can add to it, it's not recommended that you do that, right? Just do enough that you need to identify the flow and save the additional performance overhead, right? Okay, so let's give this a name, and this one's going to be the no decrypt for health and finance, right? We don't want to get in trouble with HR. Typically users do, or most organizations now are allowing users to use the computers or systems for personal use. And health and finance might be one of those personal uses. So we probably don't want to get in and start decrypting that traffic. So we've picked a zone, right? We've got our network. We can do it based on applications. In our case, we're going to do it based on URL categories for this particular instance. So let's go through and select a specific category. So financial services is one, and the other one will be health and medicine, okay? Now you can see we have additional available attributes, certificates. We can do distinguished names. We're going to do that a little bit later on, actually. I can also do the cert status, right? I can actually say yes or no to something like self-signed certificates. I have cipher suites, right? I can use one or many. I can create a group if I wanted to. So you can see here I can give it a name. I can add the cipher suites and then add them over. I can do it based on version. So I can say SSL v3. I don't want that to be available, for example. Let's log. And I'm going to come back to why I have this do not decrypt policy at the bottom when I already have a do not decrypt as the default action. So I'll come back to that in a second. But first, let's build out the HR policy. All right, we give it a name just like before. And now what we're going to do is decrypt and resign, okay? And now we'll select that subordinate CA. And inside to outside is the where we want to decrypt. And we're going to pick the inside network as the source. And as we go along here, there's additional attributes that we could use. Again, we only need to pick the ones that we need to define the flow. So we need users because this is going to be we're going to use groups, but we need that element obviously because this is very specific to a department, for example. Now we'll go through and we'll do categories here as well, okay? And in this case, what we don't want our sales folks to do without having additional inspection, I guess, right, is job search. So we will perform decryption for anything that falls under the job search category. Now, you always pick where you want this policy, right? So you can always drag and drop the policy after you add it, but you can also select where you want that placement as you're building the policy itself. So here, let's give this one a name. This one's going to be a little bit different, right? The attributes that we're going to use are almost all the same, except we're going to use applications, right? And obviously, we're going to pick the HR group in this case. So again, decrypt, resign, webinar, the webinar subordinate CA name that we gave it. We select that. We do the inside to outside, the inside network. And now we're going to go to applications. And in this case, you can see there's a variety of different categories that we've got built into the box. But we're going to pick social networking. All right, we'll add that over. We'll select where we want to insert that rule. We'll enable logging. And again, we have all kinds of other attributes that are available to us. Let's make sure we grab that HR group. And let's add that rule. So now we've got the 3 rules in place, right? So we got sales, we've got the HR group. They're both doing decrypt, resign. And now we have the everyone, finance and health, do not decrypt. And the reason why I've added that on top of the default action is because if anybody changes the default action, I still have a policy at the bottom that ensures, hopefully, that we're not decrypting that traffic, right? Someone would have to go in and either delete or remove or disable that rule, right? And then that's obviously somebody knowingly doing that, right, at that point. Now, in order for it to work, you have to actually assign it to the access control policy. So this is what I'm doing here. All I did was go into the access control policy, and I've selected that policy. And we save it out, and then we have to deploy, okay? We have to push that policy itself. Now let's go back to the rules and check our rules. So we have a bottom rule here, number 4. It's inside zone to outside to DMZ, and the inside network is a source, and there's an allow policy, and we have IPS and malware enabled. So we do have an access control policy that's allowed. Now we'll get connection events open and running here. But the one thing I want to note is if you're looking to do IPS and malware inspection or some of the advanced capabilities, and you're looking at all traffic and your traffic is SSL and you're not decrypting it, well, you're not inspecting it, right? You have to decrypt that payload in order to inspect it. All right, so what I've done here is I went to table events. So there's connection table that you can view, right? And then there's the table events. So that allows us to grab additional columns. And you can see here, I'm adding a couple of columns here focused on SSL. Now you can see there's a ton of options here: QoS, NetFlow data, user agent, etc. Obviously, select the things that are meaningful for you. And in this case, because we're focused on SSL, I'm adding a couple of extra attributes that interest me in this specific use case. So once I save that, now I have that ready, right? I can now start maybe testing, right? And the other thing to note here is that we're 14 minutes in, and I've already built an SSL decrypt policy with multiple use cases, and it's done and working, right? We're going to test it to make sure it's working, but it's only been less than 15 minutes, and we've imported the certificate, created an internal subordinate CA, we built the policy, we assigned it to access control, and we've pushed it, right? But let's do some testing. So we've logged in at this point, right? We've just tested the DMZ, it's working. We've just went to the internet, it's working. And we're just testing to make sure that all things are working. And we've logged in as the sales user, right? So let's go through the scenarios here. So the first thing is, and this is going to be a little repetitive, but it's going to show you that the policy is not just working for some things and not others. It's actually working as expected, right? So let's look at the certificate. We know Google's shouldn't be decrypted, and in this case it's not, okay? But it was an SSL/TLS site, and I'm using them interchangeably, but obviously there's a difference between SSL and TLS. Now let's go to a social site like LinkedIn, okay? All right, we go to more tools, we go to developer tools, view certificate, and you can see that DigiCert signed it. So we're not in play here, right? So that's good. We're not decrypting, and this is an expected behavior at this point. Let's go to a job posting site like monster.ca. We'll go to more tools, developer tools. We'll go to view certificate. And you can see here, we are intercepting, right? And we issued the certificate. Pretty cool. And if we look at the certificate chain, we see our internal subordinate. We can see our root CA, and we can see all the attributes when we look at the details that we filled in. Pretty cool, right? So far, so good. Let's pick another one just to make sure that wasn't just a lucky guess that we've got this working, right? By chance or something like that. Let's go to Workopolis. We can see it's secure. We go to more tools. We go to developer tools. We view certificate. And for most of, they are probably already seeing it. You can see that we are in fact decrypting that payload. All right. So far that first use case is certainly working as desired, right? So the sales is a check, right? We're good there. Now let's look at some of the logging, right? So do a quick refresh. We'll scroll across here, right? And you can remove some of these columns that aren't of interest to you. And you can see very quickly the SSL status. We've got some unsupported cipher suites that were flagged under the default rule, some do not decrypt. And look at this, decrypt resign. Okay, that's a good sign. We can see sales job posting. Okay, there's the rule name. We can see it's HTTP now because from an application protocol perspective, because we're man in the middle and we decrypted that traffic, right? We can see the certificate status, right? We've got some other elements with unsupported, right? Not checked, and that was the default rule. Pretty good. Liking what I'm seeing here. So you can see here, Facebook, default rule, right, that it was hit. So a lot of times you'll go to a site and won't realize how many different sites that you actually interact with when you go to a single site, right? It could be, 10, 15, maybe 100, right? It's crazy the amount of different websites that make up a single site. Okay, so let's make sure we've got the right user, right? So I'm going to add initiator user here. So we'll apply that, and all I want to do, there we go, sales. Perfect. Okay, so that first test was as expected. Let's actually go back in as sales again, and let's close the loop on the banking sites, right? For example. And for the sales user, the HR user, or any user that logs in, right? That could be anybody, even if they're not part of Active Directory, should fall under this do not decrypt health finance, right? So let's go to one here. Let's go to a bank site. We'll go to more tools. Let's go to developer tools. And you might be wondering right now, going, wait, he's not getting a certificate warning. How come? Well, if this is a Microsoft environment, the root CA would already be there, right? You can see that we did not decrypt that traffic, by the way. Right, so you typically would use GPO, and it would be already the trusted root CA would be in the trusted root store on the actual workstations. So you can see here, this one again not decrypted, right? So far so good. Let's go to one more here. Again, let's make sure it's not by chance or by luck or whatever it is, right? It's actually functioning as expected, and here we go, right? It worked again. Okay, so we went through a couple here. I would say that this policy is working, but let's check logging and make sure that it is working as expected. Now, the one thing with logging here, and we're going to go to search. The one thing with logging is I've only got a couple of machines, and you can see how much logs that we're getting, right? So you can imagine if you were in an organization with a couple hundred machines or 1,000, right? It'd be very difficult. So what we're going to do here is we're using search. We're looking for cibc.com in this case, so we can focus and we can see do not decrypt. Now let's make sure it's not hitting the default policy. Perfect, right? It's hitting that policy that we created. It's not hitting that default action. All right, so far so good. Okay, this time we're going to log in as HR. Now, if you remember, with HR, we're actually going to decrypt only social applications, okay? So job sites, job boards, right? Searching, that should not be decrypted. The only thing that we're going to decrypt is social sites. So same check. Let's check the DMZ. That's working, right? I'm just checking connectivity here. Normal traffic to, a normal site is working, so that's good. So internet and DMZ is working. Now we go to a job site. We go developer tools, right? At this point, everybody's got this down pat. View certificate, and we can see DigiCert signed it. Okay, so far so good. That's an expected behavior. Let's go to Facebook. Now, this is a social site. So it says secure. Go to more tools, developer tools. And what's interesting here is that we've issued a certificate with a wildcard, right? star.facebook.com, because what we try to do is copy what the certificate actually is from the site that you're actually really trying to get to. So if it was a wildcard, we're going to put a wildcard in there. Now, if we go to LinkedIn, for example, another social site, we should see that this is decrypted if the behavior is correct. And it is. And we can see that it's not a wildcard, right? It was www.linkedin.com. So again, the results are what we expect at this point, right? So I would say now we've got all users, check. We've got sales working, check. We've also got the HR user working. Now I'm just going to check Netflix here, and I'm just going to prove that we're not decrypting this traffic. And someone asked me specifically to include this for their specific use case, so I'm going to do that for them. So we can come in, we can look at the certificate. It's not decrypted at this point in time. So that's good. That's an expected behavior as well. So let's go ahead and look at some logging here. So we'll scroll across, and again, you can imagine if you have hundreds of assets going through this machine. So you can see here, do not decrypt, right? Not checked. So, you get some good insights what's happening from a, an HTTPS perspective. There's our Netflix there, which hits that default rule because we haven't created anything for that, but it is an expected behavior, and we will decrypt that shortly. Well, that's pretty good so far, right? But what about Facebook, right? So we can continue to go through here. We can see the HR user. We've got some unknown traffic there for somebody that might fall outside of Active Directory. Right, we can see do not decrypt, but going through the logs this way, what I'm trying to show here, it can become very challenging, right? There's lots of data, so you want to leverage search as much as possible, right? Wherever it makes sense, because we can go page after page after page. So let's jump to search because we have some interest in Facebook at this point in time. We'll jump down to URL. We'll enter a URL because we're looking at connection events. So let's just put in something like star.facebook. Do a quick search. We can save these searches out too. So if you have specific use cases, right, that you are interested in, like DNS sinkholing, you can build out searches and save that. So we can see the top one there, the HR1 user. It says decrypt resign. We can see our cipher suites, right? And we can see HR social decrypt Facebook, right? So perfect. Again, an expected behavior. And it's nice just coming in and validating the connection log. So this one here, what we're going to do is we're going to log in as all users, and we're just going to make sure that they aren't being decrypted, right? So they're not going to fall under the HR, and they're not going to fall under the sales group. And essentially they're going to hit either the all policy for health and finance or the default action of do not decrypt. So if I go to jobs or if I go to social sites, we shouldn't see any decryption here. So let's give this a try, right? Here we are at the job boards, and we can already see DigiCert sign that cert. So, okay, that's working. Fantastic. We can see the certificate path here. So that was jobs. Let's go to social. Okay, because we know it's decrypting this for HR, or in this case, HR or sales for jobs, right? So we just want to make sure we're not hitting any of those policies. And again, we can see that that's being signed by the original entity. So that's good. And just to be thorough here, let's go to Facebook. Again, we can see it's DigiCert real quick. And you can see that wildcard cert, right? Star.facebook. Okay, good. So far, so good. You can see some of the logging here. You can see that no authentication requested. So that's a user that has not been identified because they're not part of Active Directory, for example. And you can see that do not decrypt, and that default rule is what's actually being applied here, right? So there's some of the sites we went to. Facebook obviously was one, and the bottom here is LinkedIn, and it also hit that default rule. So perfect. So far, so good, right? Everything's working as expected. So let's build another policy here. And this time we're going to do Netflix. And again, this is really here to satisfy a request I had from somebody out in the world of firepower, wanted to see this. So let's do decrypt resign. At this point, everybody's probably knows exactly what's going to take place here. Placement of the rule could be important, right? We're inside to outside. We're going to decrypt and resign this one. We can pick a specific network. In this case, we continue to do the inside network. We'll do applications, right? So we'll do the Netflix application. And again, we can do things with additional attributes. In this case, we're not going to do that. And then we're going to log end of connections. We can put it in place that rule where we feel it would be best served. And we can add that rule. You can see it here. All right, so now we can save this out and we can deploy. And then what we'll do is test this one, and then we're going to get into some other really cool decryption scenarios. So let's go to logging, because logging is your friend here, especially when testing. The one thing to note too with access control policies, you don't need to log everything. A lot of people tend to feel that they need to log, but you don't need to log for everything. Even if there's an IPS or malware policy assigned to it, you don't need to log it. All you have to do is you can put do not log if it makes sense, and then have the alerts would still be triggered, say for IPS or malware. So we went to Netflix. It looks like it's secure, right? So we still have SSL TLS encryption, and you can see that we issued the certificate. Okay, so no surprise here. I think everybody's seen this at this point, right? We've been fairly successful so far. Our policies have been working, right? I'm just generating a couple of extra logs here just so we can look at it here. All right, so that certainly worked as expected. All right, table events. Okay, we'll scroll across, and all we're doing is quickly looking for Netflix. And you can see there's a bunch of do not decrypts. We can see default rule being hit. And then just under there, we can see all Netflix decrypt. And second from the bottom, we actually can see it there as well. Right? So here's the link here. You can see the version of Chrome, all decrypt. Okay, same thing, right? So success, right? We saw it from the results of the user, right, already, but we also can see it in the logs as well. So far, so good, right? Again, now we're, 30 minutes in. We've got multiple different policies. But this time now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to EICAR, and I'm going to download a sample of malware. And I'm going to do one with HTTP. We have a default policy, or sorry, it's not a default policy. I have a policy that's created that does inbound or inside to outside that will do IPS and malware inspection. So HTTP, when we connect to it, we should get a reset. So let's see what happens here. Look, block and reset. That's exactly what we're expecting based on that access control rule. Now, if I click on a SSL one, what happens here? Look, it would have been downloaded. Now, the reason why it was blocked is because of Microsoft's AV capability, right? Not because we stopped it. It's because they stopped it. So let's look at the malware events, right? I can go to malware events, and then actually click on it and see the life cycle of malware on my network, right? This is network file trajectory, and we can see multiple instances here. So in order to fix that SSL issue, because we were blind to that specific piece of malware, we're going to add a rule here. And it's going to get interesting here, because we're going to actually do we're going to look at the distinguished name, right? Or the CN specifically of the certificate in order to decrypt. So we don't care about the site. We don't care about the application. We are just going to look for a certificate. If the certificate matches, we're going to decrypt. We'll use ports this time just to, have some different flavor here. And here you can see on the left side, there's a whole bunch of default objects already available. So I'm going to keep the same naming convention. I already know it's secure.eicar.org because I checked that first. And I'll show you that in a second. So now I'll just put CN and then equals secure.eicar.org and save that out. And then I'll pick that policy that element and then add it across here. All right, so there we go. It's added. We can do a couple of other things here if we wanted to. Let's give it a descriptive name. And we're going to decrypt and resign. Once we do this, we'll save this out. Obviously, we're going to place this where appropriate. Now, something interesting is going to happen here. You can see the little eye. When I hit save to, you get this little, see that little eye here at the side. Now, what it's saying is that I've got to figure out that URL before I'll hit this rule. So there could be some delay. So the beautiful thing with Firepower is it'll give you an idea of what the problem is when you build a policy, or if you make a mistake, there'll be a red box within the element that you're configuring, and it'll just say, hey, you can't do that, right? So it tells you exactly what you need to do in order to solve the problem in most cases. So here we're going to do that and push this out just like before. We'll go to events. We'll go to table events, right? All right, so the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to turn off the Windows Defender because I want to make sure that we're seeing our box. The logs will show that anyway, but we want to make sure that there's nothing else that potentially blocking the file, right? I want you folks to see exactly what's taking place here. So I'm just going to disable Defender. All right, so we get the warning. We should get a malware reset, or sorry, a reset when we go to pull that piece of malware, and we did. And now we should get another reset here. So we'll do block with reset in this specific policy. And look at that, it worked. Okay, but real quick, what I want to do is I can show you the certificate here. Developer tools, and you can't see it here. What I have to do is go to the root here. So let me just get rid of that. Enter, okay, and go to view certificate. And you can see there's issued by, right? So perfect, right? It worked exactly the way we wanted it to work. And now in this specific case, we are actually mitigating malware coming through a SSL/TLS connection. All right, let's just reload this and check the logs to make sure that the logs are what we expect, even though we saw the result. So file block, you can see that right away. You can see decrypt resign, right? So that's good. And you can see the rule is the rule that we expected. And you can see the application protocol is HTTP because we've decrypted it. So fantastic, right? So that's working as expected. Let's go to malware events real quick, and we should see all the attempts. So we see 14 there because they did a bunch of refreshes, and you can see 2 IP addresses, right? And you can see it's blocked. So that worked exactly how we expected it to work. Now in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to come from the outside into the DMZ server, but we're going to copy the public key, or sorry, the private key and the certificate from that web server, and we're going to upload it to Firepower Management Center. And so we go to internal certs. We're going to browse now to that. So I've already exported that. So you didn't see that piece, but I exported it, put it on a share, and then now I'm copying it into this Firepower Management Center. So let's grab the certificate and then the key. And now what this is going to allow us to do is it's not really man in the middle now, right? Because we own or have access to that private key, right? So we can actually take care of this. So we shouldn't see the subordinate. And from a user perspective, they're blind. They don't know that we're actually decrypting. All right, so we've got that added. Right? We're 40 minutes in now, and we've done multiple different SSL rule policies. We've tested and validated those policies. Pretty easy stuff, right? Once you have an idea of what you need to do to get it to work, it's fairly easy. Even something like SSL Decrypt. So the first thing, we're coming from the outside. I want to check the box. So let's connect. If we look at the certificate, all right, well, That's what we expect, right? No magic here. And you can see that there was no man in the middle there. There wasn't a subordinate CA, right? Okay, so far so good. Let's go connection events. And if we go across here, we can see the top one here. There's the site. Do not decrypt. Okay, well, that's exactly what we expect. We haven't done anything, right? All we've done is imported that key, right, and certificate. So let's go ahead and build a policy now, right? And the reason why I showed you this is two reasons. One is, first, to show you that we're not doing anything at this point, right? So it is a policy that we need to create. And second is, I want you to see what the certificate look like in its native form, right? Where the web server is the one doing the SSL or TLS portion, not us as acting as man in the middle. So let's do, we're doing outside to inside, right here to DMZ server. Okay, so that's all good. Let's give it a name. Do not decrypt. Well, we got to change that, right? Decrypt with known key. That's the difference here. And now we're going to grab that object and move it over. Let's go back up and give that a name that's meaningful. And you can see that a couple of tabs got grayed out, right? They're not available for us in this particular deployment. But we can still do things like cert status or cipher suite or version. Let's place the rule appropriately. There's the cert status, right? So we still have that as options. So if we have an internal web server, we can start disabling some of the capabilities that aren't available on the box, or enforcing the higher levels of encryption maybe. Okay, so that's all good. We enabled logging. Let's do HTTPS for destination port. Again, I'm just trying to show flavor here, right? There's lots of different ways of doing this. We could have done applications, for example. So decrypt with known key, right? So not decrypt resign, which needs the subordinate CA to issue the certificates on behalf. We are actually going to decrypt with the actual private key. All right, so let's push that policy out. And again, you could have built all these rules all up front, get it all completely done, and only push the policy once, right? I'm doing this in stages specifically to show you each step of the way, right? It's certainly more work doing it this way, but you really get to see the product working. All right, so table view, right? I want to go back here. And some of you guys may have picked up something that I did in that policy, right? You might have been sitting there going, wait a minute, there's something not right. And you might be right, right? But hold on, right? I've got to put a little bit of troubleshooting, a little bit of it, right? A little more than what we've been showing up to this point, right? Looking at policy and the results. So it's there, and we'll get to it, right? But first, let's look at all the options from an SSL perspective. Look at all the options you have. SSL, SSL flow, action, right? It's incredible the amount of attributes that you have available to search on. And that's just SSL, right? So you can look for something very specific in your organization, right? And again, you can save these policies out. So maybe in the DMZ, you might have specific requirements for compliance. Well, you can create a recurring report that comes out and shows you what unsupported features might be there, or ciphers that might be there, right? So here what we've done is we're outside in, and we've reached it. It's working. Well, it looks kind of the same, right? At this point, it looks the same as what it did, and it should probably look the same, right? Because it's known key, right? So it shouldn't change the way the behavior was originally. But let's look through this. So we can see here, we've got some logs. It says, do not decrypt. Okay. You can see the URL. That's right. And if I look at the policies, defaults, all right. I'm missing a couple attributes here. So let me add a couple more fields. Let's grab some SSL magic. SSL actual action. Policy rule. Version's always good. Let's do certificate status as well. Okay, let's apply that. And let's have a quick look. All right, let's scroll across now and let's just confirm what we're hitting. Ah, interesting. Default rule. We didn't actually do anything. We didn't actually decrypt here. Oh, that's not good. This is our first failure, right? So far we've been hitting, perfect. And now we've got an issue where that policy. Now, I know I did push the policy out, but let's have a look at it. So we know it's deployed. Let's see, outside, inside to DMZ, inside to DMZ. Well, wait a minute. Yeah, okay. Got in the habit, inside, outside, outside, inside. I forgot the zone is actually DMZ. So it's outside to DMZ. All right, let's save that. Let's deploy and let's retest. And hopefully this time the results are in our favor, right? It's actually working. All right, there we go. We push it out. And what I try to do in some of these, right? So this was a webinar that was requested at one point. What I try to do is maximize the time. I want to make sure that I show you as much as possible in the shortest amount of time, but I like to be thorough as well. So here we've connected outside and we can see again, it's exactly the same, right? The certificate was the same. But let's look at the logging itself. So again, from the user, they would never know. Oh, look at that first line there. Decrypt, known key. And if we move it across, we can see the cipher suite, the policy, and the rule. Fantastic, right? It worked. And from a user, there's no way of knowing. Now, we all know most users have no idea anyway. Unless maybe they get a certificate warning, and then some would even argue that that wouldn't matter because they just continue to progress, right? So let's look at some of the dashboarding, right? We're done really doing configuration. I just want to show you some of the other things that are available. So you've got different views of the SSL decrypt or encrypt, right? It doesn't really matter. We give you a lot of statistics around SSL itself. And this dashboard might be something that you're interested in and you'd love to build reports from. So all you have to do, you can customize this even further, but all you have to do is go up to the right here, click Report Designer, and we can take all these dashboard elements, throw them into a report template for you automatically, get rid of the ones that you don't want or have interest in, keep the ones that you do or modify them, and now you have a report that's generated off the dashboard that you created. Pretty cool. So if I sit here now and generate that report, it'll come up in a second here. I can go to reports as well if I wanted to, but let's just open it up here. And you can see again, decryption over time, the actions, the status, etc. Right? So again, pretty cool, pretty easy to do. Unfortunately, no rocket science. And now I have that report template and I could now schedule it. So how would I do that? Well, you can just go up to scheduling, right? So just go to System. We're going to go to Tasks. We'll go to Scheduling. And then from here now we can do all kinds of different things, but our focus right now is the reports. Let's drop that down to reports. Let's hit recurring. You pick the time, the date, right? How much you want it to repeat, right? Every week, month, whatever. Which day, for example, or maybe a couple of times a week. Right? This is fairly self-explanatory. What I'm trying to show you here is you may not be aware of this scheduling capability, right? There's a lot of things that this product does. So again, I'm just trying to expose it to you. I could have made this video 15 minutes to show you SSL Decrypt with all the policies I created. But what I wanted to do is help you get a true understanding of the product. So we save this out. And at this point, we can see that we've got, on the 27th, we're generate a report on Friday. And as you can see, it's recurring every week. Pretty cool, right? And pretty easy. That's it.